The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my daughter Sarah dance with her new husband Bradley. Just 20 minutes earlier during the reception, Bradley had steered me toward a distinguished gentleman in an expensive suit. "Mr. Henderson," Bradley announced with that practiced smile I'd grown to distrust. "Meet Sarah's father, Dudley. He's an unemployed loser who's been living off his dead wife's insurance money for years." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. He extended his hand, studied my face carefully, then smiled. "Bradley," he said quietly, "you're fired." 3 months before that devastating moment at the wedding, I first noticed something was wrong. Sarah had always been my sunshine, especially after losing her mother Margaret 2 years earlier. We'd maintained our weekly lunch tradition every Thursday at Rosario's, the little Italian place where she'd celebrated getting into law school. But suddenly, she started canceling. "Sorry, Dad," she'd say over the phone, her voice strangely formal. "Bradley has a work thing. You understand?" At first I did understand. New relationships require adjustments. Bradley worked at Pinnacle Industries, some kind of financial analyst position that seemed to demand long hours. Sarah was clearly smitten with him, and at 68, who was I to judge young love? My younger daughter Emma was less understanding. At 26, she had her mother's fierce protective streak and her father's stubborn nature. "Something's off about him," Emma told me over coffee one Sunday morning. "Sarah mentioned you've been struggling with depression since Mom died. I told her that was ridiculous, because you've been busier than ever with the foundation work." That stopped me cold. The Margaret Winters Foundation, named after my late wife, had been my primary focus since her passing. We'd helped fund education for underprivileged kids across 3 counties. Depression I'd grieved certainly, but I was far from depressed. "What else has she said?" I asked Emma, trying to keep my voice neutral. Emma stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "She asked if I'd noticed any memory issues with you. Said Bradley pointed out that you sometimes repeat stories. Everyone over 60 repeats stories. It's not dementia. It's having lived long enough to have stories worth repeating. But this felt different. Calculated. The following week, I decided to surprise Sarah at her apartment. I'd bought fresh flowers from the farmer's market, yellow roses, like her mother used to grow. As I approached her door, I heard Bradley's voice through the thin walls. "Her old man's loaded, but acts like some broken-down widower," he was saying. I froze, my hand raised to knock. "Once we're married, we'll get power of attorney. The dementia story is already working." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Through the peephole, I could see him pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. "No, trust me," he continued. "Sarah's completely convinced. She actually thinks she's noticed symptoms herself now. Power of suggestion is a beautiful thing." I backed away from the door silently, my mind racing. The flowers dropped from my numb fingers as I retreated down the hallway. In the stairwell, I had to sit down to process what I'd heard. Bradley wasn't just after money. He was systematically turning my daughter against me, planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity. The calculation of it, the cold methodology, made my stomach turn. That evening, I began my documentation. Every interaction, every conversation, every strange comment would be recorded. My phone became my constant companion, the voice memo app always ready. If Bradley wanted to play games with an old man's reputation, he'd learn that some old men had spent 40 years in business learning how to protect themselves. The next Thursday, Sarah called to cancel lunch again. This time, I was ready. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, making sure the phone was recording. "Where are we meeting again? Rosario's?" "Dad, we always meet at Rosario's. Are you feeling okay?" "Oh, right. Thursday at noon." "It's Thursday today, Dad. I'm canceling today's lunch." I could practically hear Bradley coaching her in the background. "I'm sorry, honey. These days all run together since your mother... Well, you know. Maybe you should talk to someone, Dad. Bradley knows an excellent doctor who specializes in grief counseling." I'd bet my entire portfolio Bradley knew exactly what kind of doctor he had in mind, and it wasn't grief they'd be diagnosing. Over the next few weeks, the pattern became clearer. Sarah would drop hints about my confusion or forgetfulness. She'd exchange worried glances with Bradley when I told perfectly coherent stories. Once at a family dinner, she actually asked Emma if she'd noticed Dad struggling with names lately. Emma, bless her heart, shot back immediately. The only thing Dad struggles with is remembering why we're supposed to like Bradley. The tension that created between the sisters broke my heart. Sarah stormed out Bradley's arm protectively around her shoulders as he shot Emma a look of pure venom. I'd seen that look before in boardrooms, when someone threatened a hostile takeover. But this wasn't business. This was my family. That night, I made two decisions. First, I would play along with Bradley's narrative, give him enough rope to hang himself. Second, I would find out exactly who Bradley Morrison really was. The first part was almost amusing in its way. I started forgetting small things when Bradley was around. Calling him Brian once or twice, asking Sarah to remind me where she worked, simple things that would reinforce his narrative without being so obvious as to raise suspicion. The second part required calling in a favor from Marcus Thompson. Marcus and I went back 30 years, to when we'd both been young bulls trying to make our mark in Chicago's financial district. He'd left to become a private investigator, said he liked finding out the truth more than hiding it in spreadsheets. Dudley Winters. He'd answered on the second ring. Tell me you need something interesting. I'm dying of boredom running background checks on cheating spouses. How about a potential son-in-law who's trying to have me declared incompetent? The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. I'll clear my schedule. Send me everything you have. While Marcus worked his magic, I noticed Bradley escalating his campaign. He'd started joining Sarah for visits, always steering conversations toward my finances, my health, my state of mind. He'd mention how difficult it must be managing the foundation alone, how overwhelming the paperwork must be for someone my age. The wedding planning began in earnest with Bradley pushing for a quick ceremony. Why wait? He'd say with that shark smile. When you know, you know. Sarah, caught up in the whirlwind romance, agreed to a wedding in just 3 months. The speed worried me, but it also gave Bradley less time to complete whatever con he was running. One evening, Emma came by with Chinese takeout and a laptop full of research. I've been doing some digging on Prince Charming, she said, spreading out printed pages on my kitchen table. Bradley Morrison has almost no digital footprint before 5 years ago. No college friends posting old photos, no high school achievements, nothing. It's like he appeared out of thin air. I nodded, unsurprised. People can reinvent themselves. Question is, what was he before? That's what worries me. Sarah won't listen. She thinks I'm jealous because I'm single. Emma's frustration was evident. Dad, we have to do something. We are doing something, I assured her. But we need to be smart about it. Bradley's been playing this game longer than we have. The trick is to let him think he's winning until the moment he realizes he's lost. Emma studied me carefully. You're not the confused old man he thinks you are. No, I agreed. But I'll play one on TV if it helps save your sister. As the weeks passed, I watched Bradley work with the fascination of a naturalist observing a predator. He was smooth, I'd give him that. The way he'd touch Sarah's arm when suggesting she should be concerned about me, the calculated mentions of power of attorney, just in case, the steady drip of poison into her ear. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that a widowed retiree was necessarily a weak target. He didn't know about the 40 years I'd spent building businesses, negotiating deals, and learning that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one who appears least threatening. As I prepared for bed one night, I looked at Margaret's photo on my nightstand. Don't worry, honey, I whispered. I won't let him hurt our little girl. The game was far from over, but I'd been counting cards since before Bradley was born. And in this particular hand, I was holding aces he couldn't even imagine existed. Marcus Thompson arrived at my house on a rainy Tuesday morning 3 weeks after I'd hired him. His expression told me everything I needed to know before he'd even removed his wet coat. You're not going to like this, he said, settling into my living room with a thick folder. I haven't liked anything about Bradley Morrison since I met him, I replied, pouring us both coffee. Don't sugarcoat it. Marcus opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and printed records. Bradley Morrison is a ghost. That identity only goes back 5 years, just like Emma found. Before that, he was Bradley Kellerman. He slid a photograph across the coffee table. Same sharp features, same calculating eyes, but younger and with darker hair. 2 previous engagements, Marcus continued, both to women with wealthy, widowed fathers. Both relationships followed the same pattern you're experiencing. My hand stilled on my coffee cup. What happened to them? George Hartwell owned a trucking company in Nebraska. 18 months after his daughter Nicole married Bradley, George was declared mentally incompetent by a Dr. Patricia Morse. Lost control of his company, his assets, everything. The business was sold off piece by piece, supposedly to pay for his care. Marcus showed me another photo, a broken-looking man in his 70s, standing outside a rundown apartment building. That's George now. Lives on Social Security in a 1-bedroom in Omaha. His daughter won't speak to him, convinced he has dementia. He doesn't. The coffee tasted bitter in my mouth. And the second? Frank Morrison in Arizona. Same playbook, same doctor. Lost his retirement savings, his house, his dignity. Frank fought back harder than George tried to prove he was competent. Dr. Morse testified that his resistance was a symptom of his paranoid delusions. I studied the documents, seeing the pattern laid out like a blueprint. This Dr. Morse, she's the key. Already on it. Marcus pulled out another sheet. She's based here in the city. Specializes in geriatric psychiatry, particularly competency evaluations. And guess who's already made you an appointment with her? My blood chilled. Bradley. 3 weeks from now. According to my source at her office, the appointment was made by your concerned son-in-law, who's worried about your declining mental state. I set down my cup carefully, my mind racing through possibilities. I need to talk to George Hartwell. Already arranged. He's expecting your call. Fair warning, though, he's angry. Angry at Bradley, at the system, at himself for not seeing it coming. 2 hours later, I was on the phone with George. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd lost everything. He's good at what he does, George told me. Start small, plants doubts. Nicole started noticing things that weren't there because Bradley pointed them out. Did you see how Dad couldn't find his keys? Never mind, I'd left them in my jacket pocket like I'd done for 50 years. How long before they moved for conservatorship? 14 months. By then, Nicole was convinced I needed help. The worst part, I started doubting myself. When everyone around you says you're losing it, you start wondering if maybe they're right. George's story was a roadmap of what Bradley planned for me. The manufactured incidents, the gradual isolation from family members who might object, the introduction of Dr. Morse as a caring professional just trying to help. The wedding, George said quietly. He'll use the wedding. Big emotional event, lots of witnesses to your confusion. That's when he made his big play with Nicole. After we hung up, I called Frank Morrison. His story echoed George's with eerie precision. The same gradual campaign, the same doctor, the same devastating results. Dr. Morse is the key, Frank confirmed. She's got a reputation for never meeting a wealthy elder she couldn't diagnose with something. Bradley feeds her the narrative, she provides the medical cover. That evening, Emma came by to discuss what I'd learned. Her face paled as I laid out the evidence. We have to tell Sarah now, she insisted. With what proof? Bradley will say I hired Marcus because I'm paranoid. Dr. Morse will testify that paranoia is a symptom. Sarah's already primed to believe I'm declining. If we move too soon, we play right into his hands. Emma slammed her hand on the table. So we just let him continue? No, we let him think he's continuing. There's a difference. I spent the next week diving deeper into Bradley's network. Marcus uncovered 2 more accomplices, a lawyer named David Chen, who handled the conservatorship paperwork, and a real estate agent who specialized in quickly liquidating assets. They'd worked together on both previous cases. The appointment with Dr. Morse loomed, but I had my own plans for that meeting. First, though, I needed to understand the full scope of Bradley's current scheme. I invited Sarah for lunch, just the two of us. She arrived 10 minutes late, apologizing profusely, and mentioning that Bradley had reminded her 3 times about the appointment. "He worries about you too, Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "That's touching," I replied, noting how she watched me cut my food, probably looking for signs of motor function decline. "Tell me about the wedding plans." As she talked, I saw Bradley's influence in every decision. The venue was expensive, but not too flashy. The guest list carefully curated to include potential witnesses to my decline of the date, pushed up to next month, despite Sarah originally wanting a fall wedding. "Bradley says there's no point in waiting," she explained. "Plus, he wants to make sure you're able to enjoy it." The pause before "able" told me everything. In her mind, I was already fading. "I've been thinking about the father-daughter dance," I said carefully. "Your mother and I used to dance to The Way You Look Tonight. Would that be all right?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Of course, Dad. I'd love that." For a moment, she was my little girl again, not Bradley's puppet. But then her phone buzzed with a text, and I saw her expression shift back to concern. "Bradley's reminding me about your doctor's appointment. You won't forget, will you?" "Dr. Morse, right, 3 weeks." 2 weeks, Dad. It's in 2 weeks." It was actually 3 weeks, but I let her correct me. Every small mistake was a deposit in Bradley's bank of evidence. That night, I made a decision. Playing defense wasn't enough. It was time to go on the offensive, but carefully, strategically. Bradley thought he was playing chess with a confused old man. He was about to learn that some old men had been playing chess since before he was born. I started with Pinnacle Industries, Bradley's employer. A few calls to old contacts revealed interesting information about their corporate structure. More interesting was the name of their CEO, James Henderson. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't quite place it. I made a note to have Marcus dig deeper into that connection. Meanwhile, I began documenting Bradley's activities with the dedication of a forensic accountant. Every time he accessed Sarah's accounts, moved money, or made decisions on her behalf, I had Emma quietly gather evidence. Sarah had given him financial power of attorney just to help with wedding expenses, but he was using it for far more. "He's moved $30,000 from her savings into a joint account," Emma reported, "and there are withdrawals I can't trace." "He's building a nest egg," I realized. "Probably did the same with the others. Take the money before the main score." The pattern was becoming clearer. Bradley wasn't just after the big prize of my assets. He was systematically draining Sarah's resources too. It was almost elegant in its cruelty, leaving his victims both financially and emotionally bankrupt. 1 week before the scheduled appointment with Dr. Morse, Marcus called with urgent news. "You need to sit down for this," he said. "I'm 70, Marcus. I'm always sitting down." "What is it?" "James Henderson, the CEO of Pinnacle Industries. I found the connection you were looking for." My breath caught as he continued. 25 years ago, a young executive named James Henderson was about to lose everything in a hostile takeover. One investor stepped in, provided the capital to fight back, then stayed on as a silent partner. That investor's name, Dudley Winters. I closed my eyes, remembering. Henderson had been brilliant, but reckless, about to lose his company to corporate raiders. I'd seen potential in him and in Pinnacle Industries. My investment had saved both. "He owes me everything," I said quietly. "More than that," Marcus added. "You still own 40% of Pinnacle. You're the single largest shareholder, though it's buried in holding companies and trusts. Bradley has no idea his boss's boss essentially works for his future father-in-law." The irony was delicious. Bradley, so careful in his research, had missed the one connection that mattered most. He'd brought a knife to a gunfight, not realizing his opponent owned the ammunition factory. "There's more," Marcus said. "That appointment with Dr. Morse, I had a friend pose as a patient. Recorded the whole consultation. She's already discussing your case with colleagues, preparing her diagnosis before she's even met you." "Can we use that?" "Better. My friend is a retired FBI agent. He's very interested in a doctor who's been destroying lives for profit across state lines. Federal investigation, kind of interested." The pieces were falling into place. Bradley thought he had 3 weeks to complete his con. He had no idea the net was already closing. That night, I called George Hartwell again. "George, how would you like a chance to face Bradley in person, to let him know that his past has caught up with him?" The silence on the line stretched for long seconds. When George spoke, his voice was stronger than in our first conversation. "When and where?" "My daughter's wedding. 3 weeks. I'll be there." Frank Morrison was equally eager when I called him. These men had lost everything to Bradley's schemes. They deserved to see justice served. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the web Bradley had woven around Sarah. She believed her father was declining, her fiancé was protective, and their quick wedding was romantic spontaneity. The truth was so much darker. But truth has a way of surfacing, especially when helped along by a determined old man with resources Bradley couldn't imagine. The discovery phase was complete. Now came the delicate work of setting the trap without alerting the prey. 3 weeks. Bradley thought he had 3 weeks to finish destroying my life. Instead, he had 3 weeks left of freedom. The clock was ticking, and he didn't even know it. The meeting with James Henderson took place in his private office at Pinnacle Industries on a Thursday evening 2 weeks before the wedding. I'd asked him to stay late, away from curious ears and Bradley's network. Henderson hadn't aged well. The hungry young executive I'd saved 25 years ago was now a heavy-set man, with thinning gray hair and tired eyes. When he saw me, those eyes widened with surprise and something else. Guilt, perhaps. "Dudley," he said, rising from behind his massive desk. "My God, it's been, 10 years since we've met in person?" 11, I corrected, accepting his handshake. "Margaret's funeral was the last time." He winced at that. Henderson had always respected Margaret, credited her with convincing me to invest in his company. "I'm sorry, I haven't been in touch more. You know how it is, the business consumes everything. Sit down, James. We need to talk about one of your employees." I laid out everything Marcus had discovered about Bradley Morrison. With each revelation, Henderson's face grew paler. By the time I finished, he was gripping his desk like a life preserver. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "He's been using Pinnacle's resources to research his targets. I personally recommended him for the financial planning seminars, where he probably met Sarah. Don't blame yourself. Predators are good at camouflage." Henderson stood abruptly, pacing to his window overlooking the city lights. "What do you need from me?" "I need you at my daughter's wedding. Bradley's going to introduce us, try to humiliate me in front of witnesses. I need you to play along until the right moment. And then you're going to fire him, publicly. But that's just the beginning." We spent the next hour planning. Henderson would use his security access to audit Bradley's computer, looking for evidence of embezzlement Marcus suspected was there. Any predator this systematic wouldn't be able to resist skimming from his employer too. "There's something else," Henderson said as I prepared to leave. "Bradley's been pushing hard for access to our high-net-worth client list. Said he wanted to expand our financial planning services. Now I know why." Future targets, I realized. He's building a pipeline. The next morning, I met with William Stone, my attorney for the past 30 years. His office smelled of leather and old paper, a comforting constant in a world gone sideways. "Conservatorship fraud," William mused, reviewing my documentation. "Nasty business. Hard to prove, harder to prosecute. But with Dr. Morse's pattern of behavior and multiple victims, we might have a RICO case." "RICO, like organized crime. What else would you call it? Multiple parties conspiring across state lines to defraud elderly victims." That's racketeering, Dudley. We prepared powers of attorney medical directives and competency evaluations from legitimate doctors. I underwent a full neurological workup at Northwestern Memorial, passing every cognitive test with flying colors. All ammunition for the coming battle. Emma proved invaluable during this phase. While maintaining her skeptical stance about Bradley publicly, she worked behind the scenes gathering evidence. She photographed documents Bradley left at Sarah's apartment, recorded conversations when he didn't know she was present, and most importantly, maintained her relationship with her sister. Sarah asked me to be her maid of honor yesterday. Emma told me over dinner one night. She was crying, Dad. Said she knew I didn't approve, but hoped I'd support her anyway. What did you say? I said yes, of course. Told her I'd always support her even when I thought she was making a mistake. She needs to know we'll be there for her when this falls apart. The wedding preparations accelerated. Bradley insisted on handling most of the details, claiming he wanted to take the stress off Sarah. In reality, he was creating his stage, positioning everything for maximum impact when he made his move against me. I played my part perfectly. At the cake tasting, I called the baker by the wrong name 3 times. During the venue walkthrough, I got confused about which room was which. Each incident was carefully calibrated to seem genuine, while being obvious enough for Bradley to notice and file away. Dr. Morse's appointment arrived on a Wednesday. I dressed carefully for the performance, choosing a slightly rumpled suit and mismatched socks. Bradley insisted on driving me, just to make sure you find the place, Dudley. The waiting room was elegant, designed to reassure wealthy families that their loved ones would receive the best care. I recognized the setup from George and Frank's descriptions. Everything here was crafted to extract maximum value from vulnerable elders. Mr. Winters. A nurse called me back. Dr. Morse is ready for you. Patricia Morse was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-50s, expensively dressed with the practiced warmth of someone who'd perfected seeming caring while calculating net worth. Her office walls displayed diplomas and certifications, all legitimate, all weapons in her arsenal. Mr. Winters, how are we feeling today? She used the medical we, already establishing a power dynamic. Fine, though I'm not sure why I'm here. My son, no future son-in-law, said it was important. I watched her make notes. Patient confused about relationships, perfect. The next hour was a masterclass in manipulation. Dr. Morse asked leading questions designed to elicit confused responses. She showed me pictures and asked me to remember them, then distracted me with conversation before testing my recall. Every technique designed to manufacture symptoms. But I'd been prepared by George and Frank. I gave her enough rope to hang herself, seeming confused at just the right moments, while actually maintaining perfect awareness. The micro recorder in my pocket captured every unethical prompt, every leading question. I'd like to schedule some follow-up appointments, she said at the end, just to establish a baseline for your cognitive health. Whatever you think is best, doctor. Bradley says you're the expert. Her smile was sharp as a scalpel. Bradley cares about you very much. You're lucky to have someone looking out for your interests. As Bradley drove me home, he probed about the appointment. How did it go? Dr. Morse is wonderful, isn't she? Very nice, I agreed, then added with calculated confusion. Though I'm not sure why I needed to see a foot doctor. I caught his satisfied smirk in the rearview mirror. He thought he had me. That evening, Marcus called with the news I'd been expecting. Henderson's security audit had uncovered systematic embezzlement. Bradley had been siphoning money from client accounts for years, small amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts, but that added up to over $2 million. Henderson's building an airtight case, Marcus reported. He wants Bradley arrested at the wedding for maximum impact. No, I said firmly. The arrest comes after. I want Bradley to think he's won first. The higher the climb, the harder the fall. The final week before the wedding was a whirlwind of calculated chaos. I had secret meetings with George Hartwell and Frank Morrison, who'd both flown in for the event. Seeing these men who'd lost everything to Bradley's schemes strengthened my resolve. He destroyed my relationship with Nicole, George told me over coffee. She still thinks I'm incompetent, won't even take my calls. Even if we expose Bradley, I might never get my daughter back. You will, I promised. When the truth comes out, she'll need you. Be ready. FBI Special Agent Teresa Nguyen joined our planning sessions. A specialist in elder fraud, she'd been building a case against Dr. Morse for months. Your evidence is the missing piece, she told me. With multiple victims across state lines and documented conspiracy, we can take down the entire network. The wedding rehearsal took place 2 nights before the ceremony. I watched Bradley work the room, charming the guests, playing the devoted fiancé. He guided me around, making sure everyone noticed my confusion, my difficulty, with names and places. Sarah looked radiant, but stressed. The quick planning had taken its toll, and Bradley's constant hovering wasn't helping. During a quiet moment, she approached me. "Dad, are you happy for me?" she asked, vulnerability clear in her eyes. I pulled her into a hug. "I want you to be happy, sweetheart. That's all I've ever wanted." "Bradley's good for me," she said, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "He takes care of things. He's protective." "Sometimes protection can feel like control," I said carefully. She pulled back, defenses rising. "Not everyone is trying to manipulate me, Dad. Bradley loves me." I let it drop. In 48 hours, she'd know the truth. I just hoped she'd forgive me for letting her get this far. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Everything was in place. Henderson and his security team were ready. The FBI agents would be among the guests. George and Frank had their roles to play. Emma knew her cues. The trap was set. But traps can spring both ways. If Bradley suspected anything, if one piece fell out of place, I could lose my daughter forever. The stakes had never been higher. I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Bradley was probably congratulating himself on a plan well executed. He had no idea that his past victims were gathering, that his employer knew of his theft, that federal agents were preparing warrants. Tomorrow, Sarah would put on her wedding dress, thinking she was marrying a man who loved her. Instead, she'd discover she was a mark in an elaborate con. The truth would devastate her, but living a lie would destroy her. "Give me strength, Margaret," I whispered to the night. "Help me save our little girl." The preparation was complete. Tomorrow, the performance of a lifetime would begin. Bradley Morrison thought he was directing this show. He was about to learn he'd been cast as the villain in someone else's production. The morning of Sarah's wedding dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect September days that made you grateful to be alive. I stood at my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time, when Emma knocked on my door. "You ready for this?" she asked, slipping into my room. She looked beautiful in her maid of honor dress, a soft lavender that Margaret would have loved. As ready as a father can be to destroy his daughter's wedding day. I replied, the weight of what was coming sitting heavy on my chest. Emma moved behind me, fixing my tie with practiced ease. "You're saving her, Dad. Remember that." At 8 in the morning, my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and my heart sank. This wasn't part of the plan. "Dad." Her voice was thick with tears. "Can you come to the hotel? Please, I need you." I found Sarah in her bridal suite at the Fairmont, still in her robe, her wedding dress hanging like a ghost in the corner. Her eyes were red, her carefully applied makeup already smudged. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed, fury radiating from every line of her body. "Tell him," Emma commanded. Sarah shook her head, fresh tears falling. "I can't call it off. I can't." I sat beside my daughter, taking her trembling hands. "What happened, sweetheart?" The story came out in broken pieces. Emma had shown her evidence of Bradley's financial manipulations that morning, hoping to stop the wedding. Sarah had confronted Bradley in his room, and the mask had finally slipped. "He didn't deny it," Sarah whispered. "He said it was for our future, that he was just being smart with investments. But when I said I wanted to postpone the wedding to figure things out, He threatened her, Emma interjected. The bastard has been collecting compromising photos of Sarah with her married coworker. They're not real, Sarah said quickly. I mean, the photos are real, but James and I were just working late on the Morrison case. Bradley made them look different, like something was happening. He has emails, 2 fake ones he created somehow. The full picture emerged. Bradley had been building this blackmail material for months, an insurance policy, in case Sarah ever wavered. He'd threatened to send everything to her law firm to James's wife to destroy her career and reputation if she didn't go through with the wedding. He said no one would believe me, Sarah continued. That everyone already thinks I'm marrying him for his stability, while my father loses his mind. He said I'd be the gold-digging daughter who cheated with a married man, while her senile father couldn't even remember her name. I felt rage build in my chest, hot and dangerous. But I pushed it down. Emotion wouldn't help now. Sarah, look at me, I said firmly. She raised her tear-stained face. Do you trust me? Yes, she whispered. Dad, I'm so sorry. I believed him when he said you were declining. I should have known better. Forget that now. I need you to be strong for a few more hours. Can you do that? I can't marry him, she said desperately. But I can't let him destroy my career either. You won't marry him, I promised, and he won't destroy anything. But I need you to play along just a little longer. Get dressed, do your makeup, be the beautiful bride everyone expects to see. Can you trust me that far? Sarah searched my face and I saw the moment she decided. She nodded slowly. I'll help with makeup, Emma said, moving to her sister. We'll make you gorgeous. I stood to leave, then turned back. Sarah, that digital evidence Bradley has. By the end of today, it'll be worthless. But I need you to act like nothing's happened. Let him think he's won. As I left the suite, I texted Marcus. Code red. Bradley has blackmail material. Digital forensics needed ASAP. His response was immediate. On it. I have a guy who specializes in deepfakes and digital manipulation. He'll be at the wedding. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock at St. Martin's Cathedral. By noon, guests were already arriving at the hotel, the lobby buzzing with excitement. I played my part greeting family friends with just enough confusion to be noticeable. William, so good to see you, I said warmly to my cousin Robert. It's Robert Dudley. William is my brother, remember? Of course. Wedding day jitters, you know. I caught Bradley watching from across the lobby, satisfaction plain on his face. He'd dressed impeccably in his custom tuxedo, every inch the successful young professional. No one would guess he'd threatened his bride into submission just hours earlier. George Hartwell arrived at 1, looking dignified in a navy suit. We'd arranged for him to be seated where Bradley would see him during the ceremony, but not recognize him immediately. Frank Morrison checked in an hour later, bringing the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Agent Nguyen is here, he told me quietly. 3 more agents in the wedding party. They're ready when you are. At 2:30, James Henderson appeared in the lobby. I watched Bradley's face light up when he spotted his boss. Mr. Henderson. Bradley approached with his hand extended. I didn't know you were coming. Wouldn't miss it, Henderson replied smoothly. I like to support my employees' major life events. You must be excited. Absolutely. Let me introduce you to Sarah's father later. You'll find him interesting. Henderson's eyes found mine across the lobby. I gave him the slightest nod. As the time for the ceremony approached, I made my way to Sarah's suite for the traditional first look. She stood before the full-length mirror, a vision in white lace and silk. But her eyes held steel, now not tears. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I said softly. I feel like I'm going to war, she replied, adjusting her veil. In a way you are, but you're not alone. I kissed her forehead. Your mother would be so proud of how strong you are. Emma appeared, bouquet in hand. The photographer wants some shots before we head to the church. We posed for pictures, 3 generations of winter strength. Sarah smiled for the camera, every inch the glowing bride. Only those who knew her best would notice the tension in her shoulders, the forced quality of her laugh. Bradley appeared for the couple's photos, wrapping his arm possessively around Sarah's waist. I watched him whisper in her ear, probably reminding her of what was at stake. Sarah's smile never wavered, but I saw Emma's knuckles whiten around her bouquet. The ride to the cathedral was silent. Sarah sat between Emma and me, her hands folded carefully in her lap. As we pulled up to the church, she spoke quietly. "Whatever happens, Dad, I need you to know I love you. And I'm sorry for doubting you." "Nothing to forgive," I assured her. "Just remember, when things start happening, stand your ground. You're stronger than he thinks." The cathedral was packed. 300 guests had come to witness what they thought would be a beautiful union. Bradley's family occupied the left side, his parents beaming with pride at their successful son. They had no idea what their boy really was. As I waited with Sarah in the vestibule, the wedding coordinator fussing with her train, I spotted our players taking their positions. Henderson sat midway, back right side. George and Frank were separated, but visible. Agent Nguyen had positioned herself as a wedding photographer's assistant camera at the ready. The music began, and the wedding party proceeded down the aisle. Emma walked with measured steps, her face carefully neutral. Bradley waited at the altar, his groomsmen flanking him like an honor guard. "Ready?" I asked Sarah. She took a deep breath. "Let's end this." We stepped into the cathedral, and 300 people rose to their feet. The organ music swelled, cameras flashed, and Sarah moved forward with her head high. To everyone watching, she was the perfect bride. Only I felt the slight tremor in her arm, the death grip she had on my elbow. Halfway down the aisle, I caught Bradley's eye. He smiled that practiced smile so certain of his victory. In just moments, he'd have everything he'd worked for: a beautiful wife, a wealthy father-in-law, declining into senility, and access to more money than he'd ever dreamed of. As we reached the altar, I performed the traditional handoff, placing Sarah's hand in Bradley's. The gesture felt like feeding her to a snake, but I met his eyes steadily as I did it. "Take care of her," I said loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Count on it, Dudley," he replied, that smirk playing at his lips. I took my seat in the front row next to Emma. The ceremony began with the usual prayers and readings. Sarah and Bradley faced each other, the picture of young love. But I kept my eyes on the bigger picture, watching our pieces move into position. The reception would be held in the cathedral's grand hall, just across the courtyard. In less than an hour, Bradley would make his move to introduce me to Henderson, to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered. He had no idea he'd be walking into a trap years in the making. As the priest droned on about love and commitment, I thought about George and Frank, about all the victims Bradley had left in his wake. In 1 hour, their patience would be rewarded. Justice would be served at the wedding feast, and Bradley Morrison would finally face the consequences of his actions. The ceremony continued toward its inevitable conclusion. Sarah's voice remained steady as she repeated her vows, promising to love and honor a man who'd threatened to destroy her. Bradley's voice rang with confidence as he pledged himself to her every word a lie. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony," the priest intoned, "speak now, or forever hold your peace." The cathedral held its breath. I saw Emma shift beside me, fighting the urge to speak. But we waited. The real fireworks would come later, when Bradley least expected them. Then, by the power vested in me, the priest continued, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." As Bradley kissed Sarah, sealing their union, I checked my watch. 55 minutes until the reception. 55 minutes until Bradley Morrison learned that some cons have consequences and some marks have teeth. The recessional music began, and the new Mr. and Mrs. Morrison made their way back down the aisle. Sarah caught my eye as she passed, and I saw the question there. I gave her the slightest nod. "Soon, sweetheart. Very soon." The cocktail hour was in full swing when Bradley made his move. I stood near the bar, nursing a scotch, and playing the part of the confused father, when I saw him approaching with James Henderson in tow. Bradley's face wore the expression of a chess player about to call checkmate. "Dudley," he said, his voice carrying just enough to ensure nearby guests would hear. "I want you to meet my boss, Mr. Henderson." I turned slowly, letting a vague look of recognition cross my features. Henderson. Henderson. I know that name. Bradley's smile widened. He thought I was having a senior moment. "This is James Henderson, CEO of Pinnacle Industries. Mr. Henderson, I'd like you to meet Sarah's father, Dudley." He paused, savoring the moment. "He's an unemployed loser who's been living off his dead wife's insurance money for years." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several guests turned to stare. Sarah's great-aunt Helen gasped audibly. This was Bradley's grand play, publicly humiliating me, in front of someone he thought was a powerful stranger. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly. He extended his hand to shake mine, studying my face with what appeared to be polite interest. Then he turned to Bradley, and his expression shifted to something colder than winter steel. "Bradley," he said quietly, "you're fired." The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley laughed, the sound sharp and nervous. That's funny, Mr. Henderson. Good joke." "I'm not joking." Henderson pulled out his phone, swiping to a video. "This is security footage from your office computer. You've been stealing from our clients for 5 years. $2 million, Bradley. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" The color drained from Bradley's face as Henderson held up the phone, showing spreadsheets, bank transfers, a digital trail of theft. Guests pressed closer, mouths open in shock. That's impossible. You can't just..." "Oh, but I can," Henderson continued. "Especially when the man you just called an unemployed loser owns 40% of Pinnacle Industries. You've been stealing from your boss's boss, Bradley. How's that for irony?" The transformation on Bradley's face was something to behold. Confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror as the pieces clicked into place. "You own 43% to be precise," I said, dropping the confused old man act entirely. "Silent partner since 1999. Margaret and I believed in James when no one else would. Funny how life works out, isn't it?" But the show was just beginning. George Hartwell emerged from the crowd, his weathered face set with grim determination. "Hello, Bradley," George said. "Or should I call you Bradley Kellerman? That's the name you used when you destroyed my life in Nebraska." Bradley stumbled backward. I don't know you." "No, let me refresh your memory. Nicole Hartwell, my daughter. You convinced her I had dementia, had me declared incompetent, stole my trucking company. Ring any bells?" Frank Morrison appeared from the other direction, flanking Bradley like a closing trap. "Arizona, 2019, Frank said. "My daughter Monica. Same playbook, same fake doctor, same devastating results. Remember me now?" The wedding guests watched in fascinated horror as Bradley's carefully constructed world crumbled. He looked frantically for Sarah, who stood by the wedding cake, Emma's protective arm around her. "Sarah, baby, these people are lying. Your father orchestrated this. He's paranoid delusional." "No, Bradley," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "The only delusional person here is you. Did you really think you could threaten me into marrying you and get away with it?" That's when Special Agent Teresa Nguyen stepped forward, badge in hand. "Bradley Morrison, also known as Bradley Kellerman, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement, and extortion." "Extortion!" Bradley's voice cracked. "I never..." Sarah held up her phone. "Every threat you made this morning was recorded, Bradley. Every word about those fake photos, every lie you told about my father, every attempt to blackmail me into this marriage." 2 more agents materialized from the crowd as Nguyen read Bradley his rights. But the revelations weren't finished. Dr. Patricia Morse tried to slip out quietly, but found her path blocked by another federal agent. "Dr. Morse," Agent Nguyen called out, So nice of you to join us. We have some questions about your competency evaluations. Specifically, why you've never met a wealthy elderly person you couldn't diagnose with dementia. The doctor's professional composure shattered. I want a lawyer. You'll need one, Nguyen replied. We have recordings of you discussing Dudley's case before you'd even met him. Prejudgment doesn't look good for a medical professional. As the agents moved to arrest Dr. Morse, Bradley's parents pushed through the crowd. His mother, Margaret Bradley, looked devastated, but not, I noticed, entirely surprised. Bradley, what have you done? She asked. Her son turned on her viciously. Don't pretend you didn't know, Mother. You taught me everything. How to spot weakness, how to exploit trust. You just never had the courage to think big. Margaret Bradley's face crumpled. She turned to the assembled crowd, shoulders shaking. It's true, she said quietly. I taught him to manipulate people. After his father died, we were desperate. I showed him how to charm wealthy widows, how to get them to help us. I never imagined he'd take it this far. You were my first mark, Bradley snarled at his mother. Dear old Dad didn't leave us broke. I took that money, convinced you he'd gambled it away. You were so easy to fool, so ready to believe the worst of him. The final betrayal hung in the air. His own mother had been his practice victim, the blueprint for everything that followed. As the federal agents led Bradley away in handcuffs, he made one last desperate play. Sarah, tell them you love me. Tell them this is all a mistake. Sarah stepped forward, still in her wedding dress, looking every inch the avenging angel. The only mistake I made was not trusting my father. As for loving you, I loved the person you pretended to be. That person never existed. She turned to the wedding officiant. Father Murphy, is it possible to annul a marriage based on fraud? Say within the first hour. The priest, still stunned by the turn of events, nodded slowly. Under these circumstances, I believe the church would consider this union invalid from the start. Good, Sarah said. She pulled off her wedding ring and handed it to Agent Nguyen. Evidence, she said simply. The reception hall erupted in chaos as guests tried to process what they'd witnessed. But there was one more revelation to come. Marcus Thompson approached with his digital forensics expert, a young woman with bright pink hair and a satisfied grin. The threatening photos and emails, she announced to the room. Complete fabrications. Bradley used AI to create compromising images and spoofed email headers to create a false trail. We have proof of everything, including the software he used and the metadata showing when they were created. She turned to Sarah. Your reputation is safe. We can prove every single piece of supposed evidence is fake. As Bradley was let out, he passed by me one final time. Despite everything, I felt a moment of pity for him. What kind of life produces someone so twisted, so willing to destroy others for money? Why? I asked him quietly. He met my eyes, and for just a moment I saw the scared, desperate boy underneath the predator. Because people like you have everything, he said, and people like me have to take it. No, I corrected him. People like me build things. People like you tear them down. That's why you'll always lose in the end. The federal agents took him away, but the wedding reception continued. It transformed from a celebration of marriage to a celebration of justice. George Hartwell sat with his phone trying to call Nicole Hope, blooming on his face for the first time in years. Frank Morrison was surrounded by sympathetic guests, finally able to tell his story to people who believed him. Emma found me on the terrace where I'd stepped out for air. You did it, she said, hugging me tightly. You saved her. We did it, I corrected. All of us. Even Bradley's victims became heroes today. What happens now? Emma asked. Now your sister heals. Bradley and Dr. Morse face justice. George and Frank get their lives back. And maybe, just maybe, other predators will think twice before targeting vulnerable families. Sarah joined us on the terrace, having changed out of her wedding dress into a simple cocktail dress. She looked younger somehow, as if shedding Bradley's influence had restored years to her life. "Dad," she said, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For doubting you, for believing him, for almost letting him." I pulled both my daughters into a hug. "No apologies. You were targeted by a professional con artist. The important thing is that you're safe now." "Is it wrong that part of me still feels sorry for him?" Sarah asked. "His own mother was his first victim. What kind of person does that make?" "A broken one," I said. "But broken doesn't excuse the damage he caused. Plenty of people have difficult childhoods without becoming predators." We stood together watching the sun set over the city. Inside, the reception continued, transformed from a wedding to something else entirely. A survivor's celebration, perhaps. A gathering of people who'd witnessed justice served in real time. Henderson appeared in the doorway. "Dudley, the FBI wants statements from everyone. They think this case could break open a nationwide ring of elder fraud schemes." I nodded. "Tell them I'll be right in." As I turned to go, Sarah caught my arm. "Dad, thank you for being the smartest unemployed loser I know." I smiled, remembering my conversation with George Hartwell weeks ago. "Sometimes the best strategy is letting them underestimate you." Bradley thought he was hunting a confused old man. He never realized the old man was hunting him right back. The calculated strike was complete. The predator had become prey, the victims had found their voices, and justice had been served with a side of wedding cake. It wasn't the wedding any of us had planned, but it might have been exactly the one we needed. As Bradley was being escorted out in handcuffs, a woman's voice cut through the chaos of the reception hall. "Wait!" Everyone turned to see Margaret Bradley pushing through the crowd. Bradley's mother looked like she'd aged 10 years. In 10 minutes, her carefully styled hair disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears. But there was something else in her eyes now. Determination. "I need to say something," she announced, her voice growing stronger. "I need to tell the truth. All of it." Agent Nguyen paused, gesturing for the officers to hold Bradley a moment longer. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say—" "I waive that right," Margaret interrupted. "I've been silent too long, 25 years too long." She turned to face the wedding guests, many of whom were recording on their phones. The mother of the groom was about to give a very different speech than anyone had anticipated. "My son said I was his first victim, and that's true, but not in the way he told it." Margaret's voice shook, but she pressed on. "Bradley's father didn't gamble away our money. He didn't leave us with nothing. The truth is, Robert left us quite comfortable. $200,000 in life insurance, a paid-off house, a small investment portfolio." Bradley's face contorted with rage. "Shut up, Mother. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Margaret shot back. "You convinced me that your father had a gambling problem I never knew about. You showed me fake bank statements, forged debt notices. I was grieving vulnerable, and I believed my own son. You were only 16, but already so convincing." The room was dead silent except for the whir of phone cameras capturing every word. "But that wasn't enough for you," Margaret continued. "You practiced on me, refined your techniques. The concerned son so helpful with the finances. By the time I realized what you'd done, you'd moved the money offshore, put the house in your name, and convinced me I was having memory problems from the stress." Dr. Patricia Morse, still in custody, made a strangled sound. "Margaret, please, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Margaret said firmly. "Patricia was my therapist back then. Bradley found her, brought her into our lives to help with my confusion. That's how they met. That's how this whole sick partnership began." Agent Nguyen stepped forward. "Mrs. Bradley, are you saying Dr. Morse has been involved in this scheme for over 2 decades? 22 years, Margaret confirmed. "I have documents, recordings, everything. I've been gathering evidence for years, too scared to use it. But seeing those men today, George and Frank, knowing there were others, I can't stay silent anymore." She pulled a flash drive from her purse and handed it to Agent Nguyen. "Financial records, emails, recorded conversations. Bradley and Patricia have been doing this since he was in college. There are at least 30 victims across 7 states. The number sent a collective gasp through the room. 30 families destroyed. 30 elders stripped of their dignity and assets. Bradley lunged toward his mother, but the officers restrained him. "You stupid bitch. You were too pathetic to stop me then, and you're too pathetic now. Everything I did I learned from watching you manipulate Dad." "Your father never manipulated anyone," Margaret said quietly. "He was kind, generous, maybe too trusting. You saw that as weakness. But you're wrong, Bradley. Kindness isn't weakness. What you do, what you've become, that's weakness." Dr. Morse finally broke. "I want to make a deal," she blurted out. "Full immunity for my cooperation. I can give you names, dates, bank accounts. Bradley wasn't my only partner. There's a whole network." "We'll discuss that at the federal building," Agent Nguyen said curtly. She turned to her team. "We're going to need a lot more agents." As Bradley and Dr. Morse were finally led away, Sarah approached Margaret Bradley. My daughter, still in her reception dress, faced her almost mother-in-law with a mixture of compassion and horror. "Why didn't you try to warn me?" Sarah asked. Margaret's shoulders sagged. "I tried to find the courage. The night of your engagement party, I almost told you everything. But Bradley had convinced everyone I was unstable, jealous of his success. Who would have believed the crazy mother over the successful son? I would have," I said, stepping forward. "A parent trying to protect someone else's child, I would have listened." Margaret met my eyes, tears flowing freely now. "I'm sorry, Mr. Winters. I'm so sorry for what he tried to do to you, to Sarah. I created this monster, and I've been too cowardly to stop him." "You didn't create him," I said firmly. "You were his first victim, not his creator. And you're stopping him now. That took incredible courage." The reception hall had become a crime scene, FBI agents interviewing guests, collecting evidence, coordinating with field offices across the country. The wedding cake stood untouched, a 5-tier monument to a marriage that had lasted less than an hour. Henderson approached with his phone. "Dudley, I've got our legal team running a full audit. We've found irregularities going back 6 years. This is bigger than just client funds. He was selling information, insider trading tips, using Pinnacle as a hub for financial crimes." "How much?" I asked. "Preliminary estimate, $15 million in direct theft, maybe $50 million more in illegal trades based on stolen information." The numbers were staggering. Bradley hadn't just been a con man. He'd been running a financial crime empire from inside one of Chicago's most respected firms. Emma found us in the chaos, leading a shaking woman in her 50s. "Dad," Emma said, "this is Nicole Hartwell, George's daughter. She just arrived from Nebraska." Nicole's eyes were red with tears. "Is it true? Everything about my father, Bradley, really?" "It's true," I said gently. "Your father has been fighting to prove his competence for years. Bradley and Dr. Morse conspired to destroy his life." "Oh God," Nicole sobbed. "I haven't spoken to him in 3 years. I thought he was sick. I thought I was protecting him by staying away. Bradley said Dad would only get more agitated if I visited." George Hartwell appeared as if summoned, hope and fear warring on his weathered face. "Nicole. Daddy." Nicole flew into her father's arms, both of them crying. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh," George soothed, holding his daughter like she might disappear. "You didn't know. He fooled everyone, sweetheart. You didn't know." Similar scenes were playing out around the room as families connected victims, found validation, and truth finally came to light. Frank Morrison was on the phone with his daughter Monica, while Margaret Bradley sat with FBI agents providing detailed testimony about 2 decades of fraud. My phone rang. Marcus Thompson. "Dudley, you need to see the news. This is going national." Someone turned on the large screen typically used for wedding slideshows. Every major network was covering the story. "Wedding sting exposes multi-state elder fraud ring." "Groom arrested at own reception." FBI uncovers $50 million scam. But it was the crawler at the bottom of CNN that made my blood run cold. Authorities seeking potential victims in 12 states. 12 states. How many Georges and Franks were out there destroyed and disbelieved? Sarah stood beside me watching the coverage. Did we know it was this big? We suspected, I admitted. But this? Bradley was just one tentacle of something massive. Dr. Morse's lawyer arrived, a slick-looking man who immediately began negotiating with the FBI. Within minutes, it became clear she would flip on everyone to save herself. Names, dates, and locations poured out as she desperately tried to avoid spending her remaining years in federal prison. There's a judge in Florida who signs conservatorship orders without proper evaluation, she revealed. A network of lawyers who specialize in quick asset liquidation. Real estate agents who buy properties at 20 cents on the dollar. It's an entire ecosystem. Each revelation was worse than the last. Nursing homes that drugged residents to make them appear incompetent. Financial advisors who identified targets at grief counseling groups. A twisted marketplace where human dignity was currency and family trust was a commodity to be exploited. The wedding photographer, actually an undercover agent, had captured everything. Photos of Bradley's shock, Dr. Morse's breakdown, Margaret's confession, evidence that would play in courtrooms across the country. As the evening wore on, the reception hall emptied of wedding guests and filled with law enforcement. The band had long since packed up, the caterers dismissed. Only the core group remained, family victims and those seeking justice. Mr. Winters, Agent Nguyen approached with an update. We've frozen 17 accounts so far. The asset recovery team thinks we can return most of the stolen funds. It'll take time, but these people will get their money back. And their reputations, I asked. Their relationships with their children. That's harder to restore, she admitted. But with Bradley and Dr. Morse's prosecutions, public families are starting to understand they were deceived. It's a start. Around midnight, as statements were finalized and the last agents prepared to leave, I found myself alone with Sarah and Emma in the empty reception hall. The three of us stood among overturned chairs and abandoned champagne glasses, the debris of a wedding transformed into something else entirely. I'm proud of you, I told Sarah. It took incredible strength to play along, to trust the plan, even when Bradley was threatening you. I had a good teacher, she replied. All those years watching you negotiate deals, seeing how you read people. I guess I inherited more than just your stubbornness. Emma raised a half-empty champagne bottle. To the Winters family. We may be dysfunctional, but we protect our own. We drank straight from the bottle, no longer concerned with propriety. The wedding was over, but something more important had taken place. A predator had been stopped. Victims had found justice, and a family had discovered its own strength. As we prepared to leave, I took one last look at the wedding cake. 5 pristine tiers of fondant, and flowers untouched and perfect. It seemed wrong to waste it. Should we? Emma asked, following my gaze. Sarah grabbed 3 forks from a nearby table. Absolutely. I paid for it after all. We stood there in our formal wear, eating wedding cake directly from the bottom-tier chocolate and raspberry-filling sweet on our tongues. It tasted like victory, like justice, like new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring legal proceedings, media attention, and the long process of healing. But tonight, in the wreckage of a wedding that revealed a nationwide criminal enterprise, the Winters family was whole, strong, and ready for whatever came next. The complete unraveling of Bradley Morrison had revealed something beautiful underneath the unbreakable bonds of family, the courage of victims becoming heroes, and the truth that no lie, no matter how carefully constructed, can stand forever against determined love. 6 months after the wedding, that wasn't. I stood in the conference room of Pinnacle Industries, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Spring had arrived early, and the city below buzzed with renewed life. Behind me, George Hartwell and Frank Morrison studied financial documents with the intensity of men reclaiming their lives. The final restitution payments will be distributed next week. William Stone announced, closing his leather portfolio. Every victim Bradley Morrison defrauded will be made whole, at least financially. What about the ones we don't know about? Frank asked. The FBI said there might be victims who never came forward. That's why we're here, I reminded them. The Hartwell Morrison Winters Foundation for Elder Justice. We'll find them, help them, and make sure this never happens again. The foundation had been Sarah's idea, born from the ashes of her devastation. Using the recovered funds and a significant contribution from Pinnacle Industries, we'd created a resource for elder fraud victims that went beyond just financial recovery. Legal aid, counseling, family mediation, and most importantly, a voice for those who'd been silenced. The conference room door opened, and Sarah entered with Emma and a young man I'd grown quite fond of over the past few months. Sorry we're late, Sarah said, setting down a box of files. Aaron was helping me process the last of the victim impact statements for Bradley's sentencing. Aaron Walsh had entered our lives quietly, a 7th-grade history teacher who'd volunteered to help the foundation organize its educational outreach. He'd fallen for Sarah, not despite her recent trauma, but because of how she'd transformed it into purpose. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values, rather than charm and manipulation. 25 years, Emma announced, holding up her phone. The judge just announced Bradley's sentence. 25 years federal time, no possibility of parole for 15. A collective exhale filled the room. Justice, real justice, had been served. And Dr. Morse? George asked. 18 years, Sarah replied. Her cooperation helped, but the judge said medical professionals who betray their oath deserve special condemnation. What about the network? Frank pressed. The judge's lawyers, the whole system. 47 convictions so far, I told them. The FBI says it's the largest elder fraud takedown in history. Bradley's mother's evidence was the key to everything. Margaret Bradley had become an unexpected hero in this story. After her revelation at the wedding, she'd worked tirelessly with federal prosecutors providing decades of evidence. She'd lost everything to her son's schemes, but found purpose in preventing others from suffering the same fate. Speaking of Margaret, Sarah said, she's here. Wants to address the board about the foundation's mission statement. Send her in, I said. She's earned the right to be heard. Margaret entered looking healthier than she had 6 months ago. The woman who'd cowered at her son's wedding had been replaced by someone who'd found strength in truth. I've been thinking about our outreach programs, she began without preamble. We're focusing on victims, which is crucial, but we also need to educate potential perpetrators. People like Bradley don't spring fully formed into the world. There are warning signs, intervention points. What are you suggesting? George asked, though his tone was more curious than challenging. A program in high schools and colleges, teaching ethics, empathy, the real cost of financial crimes. Show them victims like us make it real. Maybe we can stop the next Bradley before he starts. The room considered this. Preventing future crimes by educating potential criminals was ambitious, perhaps naive. But hadn't we already achieved the impossible? I like it, Frank said finally. The Margaret Bradley Program for Ethical Financial Leadership has a nice ring to it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You'd name it after me, after everything my son did? You're not responsible for your son's crimes, I said firmly. You're responsible for your courage in stopping them. That deserves recognition. As the board meeting continued, I noticed Sarah and Aaron slip onto the terrace. Through the glass, I watched him take her hands, speaking earnestly. Sarah's face lit up with the kind of smile I hadn't seen since before her mother died. Emma appeared at my elbow. He's going to propose, you know. Asked my permission last week. Just yours, I asked, mock offended. He's terrified of you. Emma laughed. Probably worried you'll run a background check. Already did, I admitted. Clean as a whistle. More importantly, he makes her happy. The meeting wrapped up with plans for 3 new victim support centers and a national awareness campaign. As everyone prepared to leave, Sarah and Aaron returned from the terrace. The glowing look on my daughter's face told me everything. Dad, Sarah said, Aaron and I have something to tell you. I pretended surprise as she showed off the modest but beautiful engagement ring. Unlike Bradley's flashy diamond, this one held meaning, not just monetary value. It had belonged to Aaron's grandmother, a woman who'd spent 60 years building a loving marriage. We want a small wedding, Aaron said quickly. Family only. Sarah's been through enough spectacle for a lifetime. Whatever makes you happy, I assured them, pulling both into a hug. 1 year later, I stood in my backyard, watching Sarah and Aaron exchange vows under the apple tree Margaret had planted 20 years ago. 30 guests, instead of 300 homemade decorations, instead of professional planning, love, instead of manipulation. George Hartwell sat with Nicole, their relationship fully healed. Frank Morrison had his arm around Monica, who'd moved back to Arizona to be near her father. Margaret Bradley, now a respected advocate for elder rights, wiped tears as she watched the ceremony she'd helped make possible by finding her courage. Emma stood as maid of honor again, but this time her smile was genuine. She'd started dating Marcus Thompson's associate, the pink-haired digital forensics expert, who'd exposed Bradley's fake evidence. They made an odd but perfect couple bonded by their shared passion for justice and technology. Do you, Aaron, take Sarah to be your lawfully wedded wife? The officiant asked. I do, Aaron said, his voice strong and sure. Do you, Sarah, take Aaron to be your lawfully wedded husband? I absolutely do, Sarah replied, earning gentle laughter from the gathered friends and family. As I watched them exchange rings, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. A father's worst nightmare had transformed into a catalyst for change. Bradley's attempt to destroy our family had only made us stronger, more connected, more purposeful. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared. As Aaron and Sarah kissed, sealing their union with trust, instead of deception, applause erupted from our small gathering. This was what a real wedding looked like: joy without performance, love without calculation. During the reception in our living room, I found myself on the back porch with Henderson. Pinnacle Industries had not only survived the scandal, but thrived under his renewed leadership with transparency and ethics now core to its mission. You know, he said, when Bradley introduced us that day, calling you an unemployed loser, I almost laughed. If only he'd known he was insulting the man who'd made everything possible. The best cons always contain the seeds of their own destruction, I replied. Bradley was so focused on the surface, he never looked deeper. Sarah found us there as the sun set. Dad, it's time for our dance. As Tony Bennett's voice filled the air with, "The way you look tonight." I held my daughter close, remembering another dance with another beautiful woman at another time. Mom would be so proud of you, I whispered. She'd be proud of you too, Sarah replied. You saved me, Dad. You saved all of us. We saved each other, I corrected. That's what families do. As the song ended and Aaron claimed his bride for the next dance, I stood with Emma, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. No regrets, and she asked. None, I said honestly. Every painful moment led us here. Bradley's in prison, his victims are healing, and we've built something that will protect others. Margaret would call that a win. To Mom, Emma said, raising her champagne glass to the stars. To Margaret, I agreed. And to the truth that sometimes the greatest strength lies in appearing weak. When someone underestimates you based on surface judgments, they reveal their true character and give you the power to protect those you love. The party continued late into the night, filled with genuine laughter and real joy. No one mentioned the other wedding, the one that had ended with FBI arrests and shattered illusions. That was past. This was future. As the last guests departed, and Sarah and Aaron left for their honeymoon, gifted by George and Frank, as thanks for restoring their lives, I sat alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd first planned to take down Bradley Morrison, where I'd comforted Sarah after she learned the truth, where our family had rebuilt itself from betrayal. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a wedding cake, was a photo from today's ceremony. All of us together, Sarah radiant in her simple dress, Aaron beaming with pride, Emma laughing at something off camera, and me standing tall, no longer playing the confused old man. Next to it was a business card, the Hartwell Morrison Winters Foundation for Elder Justice. Our tragedy had become our purpose, our pain transformed into protection for others. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Thank you for being the best unemployed loser a daughter could ask for." "I love you, Dad." I smiled, thinking of all the unemployed losers out there who might be underestimated, dismissed, or targeted. They had advocates, now defenders, who understood that wisdom doesn't diminish with age, and that the measure of a person isn't in their employment status, but in their character. Bradley Morrison had thought he was preying on weakness. Instead, he'd awakened a movement. And from his downfall had risen not just justice, but hope. Not just retribution, but redemption. Not just an ending, but a beginning. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I paused at Margaret's portrait in the hallway. "We did it, honey," I whispered. "We protected our little girl." In the gentle darkness of our family home, surrounded by memories of loss and triumph, I felt her presence like a warm embrace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victims to help new battles to fight. But tonight, there was peace. Tonight there was justice. Tonight there was love. And that more than any fortune Bradley could have stolen was true wealth. I hope this story resonated with you. Have you or someone you know ever faced manipulation or betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you find the strength to fight back? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes to the reality of elder fraud, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to hear more powerful stories of justice and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that predators can be stopped, and that families can emerge stronger from even the darkest betrayals. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, the greatest strength often lies not in what we show the world, but in what we quietly do to protect those we love. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, and never let anyone underestimate the power of a determined heart.